Unit 7, Video 1, Ecology Basics. So on your note sheet, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write down what you predict ecology is. And I want you to be very specific with your definition. I'll give you a second to do that. So if you thought that ecology had something to do with living systems and how things interacted with one another, you were right on track. If you thought it was something different, well, you're going to learn something new. So here we go. So what is ecology? Ecology is the scientific study of interactions between organisms and their environments, focusing on energy transfer. It is also the science of relationships, how things interact with one another. So what do I mean by environment? Well, the environment is made up of two factors. We have our biotic factors, that all the living organisms that inhabit the earth, and then we have our abiotic factors, the non-living parts of the environment, temperature, soil, light, moisture, air currents. We also have a specific hierarchy of the way that things are going to interact with one another, starting with the very big, the biosphere, which is the entire livable area of Earth, going down to the organism, which is the individual and the smallest unit. So an organism is any unicellular or multicellular form exhibiting all of the characteristics of life. An individual is also the lowest level of organization. A population is a group of organisms of one species living in the same place at the same time that can interbreed, produce fertile offspring, and compete with each other for resources, food, mates, shelter, and the other things they need to live. Communities are several interacting populations that inhabit a common environment that are interdependent. So here we have a community where we have the predators, the prey, the decomposers, the bacteria, all the things that interact to support one another. An ecosystem is a population in a community and the abiotic factors with which they interact. So it combines your community and population levels. And we have both marine and terrestrial ecosystems. The biosphere is the life-supporting portions of Earth composed of air, land, freshwater, and saltwater. And this is the highest level of organization and encompasses everything. Habitat versus niche. The niche is the role a species plays in the community, its total way of life. The habitat is the place in which an organism lives out its life. A niche is determined by the tolerance limitations of an organism or limiting factor. The limiting factors can include any biotic or abiotic factors that restrict the existence of organisms in a specific environment. Examples of limiting factors would include the amount of water, food, temperature, space, or mates in an area. There are also feeding relationships that are important to the study of ecology. And the three main types are producer and consumer, predator-prey, parasite-host. A producer is going to be all the autotrophs, plants that trap energy from the sun, and these are the bottom of the food chain. The consumers are going to be all heterotrophs. They ingest food containing the sun's energy, so you have herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and decomposers. Consumers, our primary consumers are the ones that eat plants, and those are our herbivores. Our secondary and tertiary consumers are our prey animals and carnivores. So carnivores, they eat meat. These are our predators. They hunt prey animals for food. Our scavengers are going to feed on carrion or other dead animals. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. And decomposers break down the complex compounds of dead and decaying plants and animals into simpler molecules that can be absorbed, and fungus are a good example of decomposers. Now, as we talk about the interactions between these things, we're also going to talk about where they lie on the food chain. Each link in a food chain is known as a trophic level. Trophic levels represent a feeding step in the transfer of energy and matter in an ecosystem. Biomass is the amount of organic matter comprising a group of organisms in a habitat. As you move up the food chain, both the available energy and the biomass decrease. Energy is transferred upwards, but is diminished with each transfer by about 10%. Only 10% of the energy goes onward, 90% is transferred as heat and transferred to the environment. So in the bottom of our trophic pyramid here, we have our producers, which are our autotrophs, the plants, and the energy will go upward to our primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. Our primary consumers are going to be herbivores like deer, cows, animals of that nature. Our secondary consumers would be small carnivores, the things that eat on our primary consumers. Tertiary consumers would be the top carnivores like sharks, eagles, and things of that nature. So the energy is going to transfer from the producers through all of these things. So all of the energy is contained within the producers. As you move up the trophic levels, though, only 10% of the energy that was originally in the producers goes up to the primary consumers, and then only 10% of that energy goes on to the secondary, and 10% of that goes on to the tertiary. So a lot of energy is lost as we move up the pyramid. So again, here's an example of it. You have all your producers, which are 100%, and then the first consumer only gets 10% of that, and then the next one gets 1% of what was originally available as we go on. So you have lots and lots of producers, lots and lots of plant matter, and lots of primary consumers, and you have very few of the top or tertiary, or even the secondary consumers. Now, a food chain is a simple model that shows how matter and energy move through an ecosystem. Here's a very simple one where we have the algae and the floating plants. The arrow indicates that it is being eaten by. That's how you read it. The algae and floating plants are being eaten by the aquatic crustaceans, which are being eaten by the fish, which are being eaten by the raccoons. So the arrow points in the direction of where this is going. And this is a simple food chain where you have the sun and water coming in to produce the grass. You have your primary consumers, your secondary consumers, and your tertiary consumers. So the grass is eaten by the grasshopper is eaten by the snake, and the snake is eaten by the hawk, which is then decomposed by the fungus, which goes back into making the grass, and the whole cycle starts over again. Now, a food web is going to show all the possible feeding relationships in a community at each trophic level, and it's going to represent a network of interconnected food chains. So a food chain is just one path of energy. A food web is all the possible paths. So here would be a food web in the desert biome. So you would start off with your primary producers, which would be eaten by all the things that are plant eaters, or primary consumers, which could be eaten by anything that is a small predator, which can be eaten by the large predators. And it just shows all the different relationships. And again, with the temperate forest biome, which would be more of our area where we have wolves, bears, cougars, all the things that they can eat and will eat. We also have, this is more of a Arctic area, where you have your salmon, your snails, snow geese, marsh hogs, bald eagles, and all the things that they could eat. The arrows again are saying is eaten by, so the salmon is eaten by the harbor seal, which is eaten by the killer whale. Harbor seals are eaten by the mosquito, or bitten by the mosquito, which they feed off of them, off of their blood. And the different colors show us the levels. So the green are our producers, the red are going to be our primary consumers, and then the blue is going to be our tertiary and secondary consumers. A soil food web showing how everything is going to be interacting. Now, sometimes there are toxins in the food chains. Normally they're added in by human hands, and this is one effect that we can have on the environment. So while energy decreases as it moves up the food chain, toxins will increase in potency. This is called biological magnification, and a good example of this would be DDT in bald eagles. DDT is a pesticide, and these pesticides leach into the cells of the plants. Those plants are eaten in large quantities by your primary consumers, which are eaten by your secondary, which are eaten by your tertiary. Now, every time you go up the food chain, they're eating more and more because, well, they need more energy, and there's less energy contained within the food, so they're eating more of the things that have the stuff in them. So as you go up the food chain, you're going to find that there's going to be lots of the toxin in your higher levels than there would be in your lower levels, mainly because of how many there are. Another good example is mercury in tuna, because they are also sort of towards the top of the food chain. They would eat more of the little things, and that would magnify within their system. That's it. I hope you learned something, and if you have any questions, please let me know.